Well, hey, folks, welcome back to another one of our panel conversations. I'm here with an extra special guest today, founder of Changing Work, Scott Shute. Scott, welcome.
Thanks very much. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you here. So, we're here talking about the book Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. And we had the rare privilege of both of us being able to write a chapter for this book. But today we're here to talk about your chapter, Scott. So, first of all, when we get started here, maybe tell folks a little bit about you, where you're dialing in from, and maybe we can launch in a little bit into the story of this
Sure.
chapter.
Well, short story is I had a career in tech. I was an executive at LinkedIn, and then I created my own role. I was the head of mindfulness and compassion program. After having a lifelong practice, I finally got to marry all the things together. I did that for a few years at LinkedIn, then left and started Changing Work with Nicholas and Amy, where our mission is to change work from the inside out. And I find that every day is an opportunity for me to learn more about this practice, the practice of mindfulness, about awareness, the practice of compassion. Um, and I love the fact that my job or my career is about being able to try to pull that together, to curate the best practices and help make the workplace and the world a better place.
Yeah, that's a beautiful mission, and obviously one I'm very keen of myself. I was particularly excited. I had heard the story before that you wrote in the book, but reading it in print really kind of, I feel like, let it land really solidly. You're a cyclist, there's a whole kind of theme around cycling within your chapter that you beautifully weave together this kind of really poignant lesson around compassion and how we relate to other people. But what I'd love to hear from you is just maybe like a little bit of an overview of the story and like
Sure.
what inspired this story? Why this story for this book?
Sure. Well, let me tell a little bit about the story because the goodness is in the color. I could give you the bullet points, whatever. So I'm a cyclist. I love everything on two wheels. And I was out with my buddy on a Sunday afternoon. We were doing this big climb I live in the Bay Area near San Francisco in San Jose. And we were having a good time. It was Sunday morning. It was chill. We were having a good time. And they were doing some construction on the road we were on, and cars were having to slow down a little bit to go by us. And I was kind of shaken out of my wonder by this car driving by, this pickup. This young guy is getting out of the window and just screaming at us and saying every nasty thing he could say, you, this and that, and just almost foam coming out of his mouth, anger. And immediately I was reacting to it. But in the moment, I tried to play it cool, and he's driving away, and I'm like, "Hey man, you have a great day. I hope you have a great day." And he's still just like screaming. And on the outside, it's like, okay, I'm a little bit proud of my response because I didn't take the bait.
Mhm.
But on the inside, that's not exactly how I felt. Like I felt it. I felt his anger. I felt his rage. And I was a little bit fearful too, because I'm in spandex to be I'm on a 16-pound bike. He's in a 3,500-pound pickup truck, with who knows what else in there. So he goes on. That's the end of it. A few months later, I'm cycling with my son. We're coming back from a ride. We're in town, and we're in town with traffic lights. And this car goes by me full of younger people. And this kid leans out the window and he's screaming something at me. And instantly I think of the other guy and I'm activated. And the guy, he gets back in the car and I can see and hear the whole car laugh. And inside I'm like, grr. And and we're at stoplights. So I can also see that his car is going to stop at the next stoplights. And I have a few seconds to prepare before I kind of cruise right by him. And I'm thinking, okay, what is my response going to be? You know, I could scream something back at the open window as I drove by, like 3 feet from him. I could have a hand gesture that might feel appropriate to me. And I landed on, as I went by, I kind of said, "What'd you say?" In as neutral of a tone
Mm.
as I could conjure in that moment. And he's laughing, he's smiling, and he goes, "Oh, what's your FTP?" And I thought, and I come up next to my son, and I ask my son, like, "What's FTP again?" Because it sounded familiar. And he goes, "Functional threshold power." He's missed this whole interplay, which I relax. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is this total nerdy cyclist thing that measures how strong of a rider you are." And
Yeah.
so I realized that this kid, this young man, he's in my tribe. He's in my group. He's one of me. And he's just like this big Labrador retriever, like, barking at the other dogs as he goes by. And so I shout back a number which is way bigger than my actual number of FTP. And he says, "Really?" And I say, "No." And everybody laughs. And I was calm and everybody's laughing, having a good time. And I was thinking to myself, how often does this happen to me? Where something happens in the world, and because of my fear response center, because of trying to stay alive, I take it at its worst. I take it as the worst thing that could have happened, right? I make all kinds of assumptions about this other person. And so I wanted to kind of, for myself and for others, for this book, talk about how we often react as if the thing that's happening is the worst possible thing in the things that we could conjure. And what would it be like if we didn't react that way?
Mhm.
What if we just reacted in a more compassionate way or tried to? And that was the nature of my story.
Well, I love it. I love the story. I didn't know the acronym, and I'm kind of curious too, like, do you have any sense whatsoever of like what the difference was, not just for you between those two engagements and like why you might have had a reaction in one versus the reaction in the other, but maybe as a lesson to other people who obviously this happens regularly. Road rage is a big thing. We're out there in these really vulnerable moments in our lives, especially if you're riding a bicycle. Like I used to be a cyclist myself, so I know that feeling of vulnerability.
Yeah.
But what do you think would be like the shift for other people who might be were encounter a similar type of a scenario where
Mm.
they're confronted with this inflection point where they get to make a decision and they get to show up with compassion and they get to show up with whatever the impulse is that just arises within them?
It's the shift. And look, this is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for all of us. It's the shift from animal to something else. You could call it soul, you could call it our best self, a more evolved human, whatever it is. As an animal, we're just trying to stay alive. And so our amygdala, that fear center of our brain, is super active, trying to keep us alive. So in the first scenario, and maybe the second too, but the first scenario, I was right to be afraid internally. And how I handled it, I think was pretty good for that situation, which is just try to be as calm as I can be.
Mhm.
And it was helpful that I was there with my friend who's also a spiritual student. And so like I don't want to embarrass myself in front of my spiritual friend
Yeah, a little
by
accountability.
being a jerk. But so it's trying to be as neutral as we can in the moment. And in the second moment, I tried to do the same thing. I was triggered and maybe falsely triggered. I made some assumptions, but I got triggered and I tried to remain neutral. And then I quickly, as I could, moved from neutral to positive. So I think that's it. If we can, in the moment, in that heat of the moment, try to not be triggered, try
Mhm.
to be neutral. And we can ask ourselves questions like, what else is true? What else is possible?
Mhm.
So if somebody cuts me off, like I might react in the moment, it's like, oh, that was dangerous. But then I need to let it go pretty quickly because look, I'm still alive. I didn't crash into the person. And then do I really need to be angry at them for cutting me off? Maybe they have someplace better to go. Have I ever operated a car that way? Yes. So we start to ask ourselves these questions and we can calm down. Once that flash of survival instinct has come and gone, then it's using our practice to get to a place where we can let it go and move forward in as positive a way as possible.
Yeah, really, really love the way you frame that. And to me, we're talking about this one specific type of a scenario where you're interacting with other people within vehicles, you're on a bicycle, there's a vulnerability there. Now we're talking really also about workplace, which is so much about our mission. And we're maybe not at mortal peril within the workplace, but a lot of the same animalistic tendencies can tend to come up. We can feel
Oh
threatened,
yeah.
we can feel
Oh yeah.
vulnerable, we could feel at risk in some capacity. So what's the connection for you between these choice points within your cycling life and your work life?
It's all the same, maybe just sometimes less dramatic at work. So we're probably not in physical danger. Some people for sure have jobs where they are in physical danger. Most of us in the white collar world, we're not in physical danger. We might feel the same way because we feel that danger of, well, what if we got fired? Ultimately, that's the biggest thing that will happen. Or what if they don't like me? Or what if whatever? And so we get triggered in a lot of the same ways. Or we get tribal. So you imagine like I used to run customer service organizations. And maybe there would be this tribal thing between customer service and product, or customer service and sales, or product and sales. We become tribal. And so you're having that meeting with whoever, we'll make somebody up, Joe from sales. And Joe is saying something like in my second story, and you react to all the ways that any other salesperson has ever said anything and lump what Joe is saying right now into that lump of things, your belief system. And you become triggered. I'll say, I become triggered. Well, that's not fair to Joe. Joe is in this present. He's trying to solve a problem. I'm trying to solve a problem. In the workplace, if we can get to the point where instead of having two individual problems that we're both triggered about, we can come to as a company, the place where we come together, where we're part of the same tribe. What's the common problem we're trying to solve? And so then it's different than just saying, Joe's a sales guy. So look, dude, I got to make my quota. I'm a support guy. I'm saying I got to meet my budget and I need to keep my team happy. The combined option is, hey, we're trying to solve this problem for the customer. And by doing so, we'll probably, make a deal that will make everybody happy.
Yeah.
So it's calming down in the moment, letting go of that animal tendency, and then saying, okay, jointly, what are we trying to solve for here? And how can we do it together?
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, it sounds like a beautiful way of approaching things. I think where we get into trouble sometimes is to use the bicycling analogy. It's not so much that we have all this time between stoplights. It's actually more like we're on the Autobahn and people are passing by us at 100 miles an hour. And we're trying to make these choices and we're trying to make these shifts in our experience while things are happening at a really, really rapid pace. So oftentimes what we tend to notice, compassion kind of falls down by the wayside, empathy kind of falls down by the wayside, and we maybe get more into this kind of transactional experience with other
Mm.
people. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do we balance that? How do we find that extra spaciousness between stoplights for ourselves?
This is hard. It's hard for all of us. I mean, Nick and I are having this conversation, but Nick and I have experienced this with each other, right? When we are busy and we don't check in with each other, when we are busy getting task oriented, we forget to stop and to say, hey, man, how are you?
Mhm.
And make time for connection. So the antidote is to give ourselves some space. There's a fly right. The fly wants to be a part of this too. To give ourselves some space, to create reminders that there's more important things at play than just the tasks. Because it's really easy to get overwhelmed by the tasks and to get only task focused, that we forget our own humanity. And when we forget our own humanity, then we stop doing the little things for others, right? When we're in survival mode, it's really hard to then take time to share gratitude, take time to share compassion and empathy. So it starts with us and the self-responsibility. It's not, for me, it's not Nick's fault that he didn't make time to ask how I was. It's about me. I need to be the one who creates space, and Nick for himself needs to be the one who creates space to build the type of environment that we want to live in. Otherwise, we are also part of the problem.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think what we're talking about here is actually much bigger than just a bicycling incident or our own personal experiences in the workplace. We're seeing these major shifts within corporations and within the world of work these days where it feels like a little bit of the humanity is getting squeezed out in
Yeah,
favor of productivity or technological advancement or
yeah,
shareholder value.
yeah.
And I wonder, this book, Leading with Compassion, this idea of cultivating connection from the inside out. Why this topic and why this book right now?
This could not come at a better time. It's always a good time, but wow, here in America and other places, there's the pendulum shifting. And right now, in this moment, the pendulum is shifting to things like Elon Musk working in the government, doing mass scare tactics, mass layoffs, like he did mass layoffs at Twitter/X, which is another way of saying forget what you believe about policy, right? Like I believe in smaller government too, by the way, but this is not a compassionate way to do it. And so, with this taking center stage at the national level, international level, maybe there's this wave, and certainly there is this wave of companies who are saying, well, I guess this is what we're doing now. This is in vogue, so let's just act like this. I think that's a mistake. So, this moment is in time, and this book is an opportunity for each one of us to choose something different for ourselves. Look, regardless of what your policies are, we can still do things in a compassionate way. We can still reduce government spending. We can still reduce the size of our company. We could do it in a compassionate way. We could still pass on price increases to our customers or tell our customers that their product is going to be delayed or do all the hard things that are still required in a business. We can still do it in a compassionate way. Because I will take this time to remind myself and everyone that when you think about your life, at the end of your life, and your loved ones are gathered around you and they're going to write your, what's it called when you die? Your
Yeah,
obituary,
yeah, your
the final
obituary,
bio,
your final bio.
your final bio, the one that gets written in stone. What do you want it to say?
Yeah.
Are you going to be super proud of, I reduced spending by 30% in my department? I hit quota 62 times in a row. No, you're not going to care.
Mm,
You're going to say, I want them to remember that I was a good person.
mm,
I want them to remember that I treated people well. I want them to remember that I left this place better than I found it.
mm,
So it's remembering that in the moment when we're busy, in the moment when we're making policy decisions, or in the moment when we're deciding how those policy decisions will get rolled out.
mm.
That's how it shows up at work.
To me, that's a really beautiful call to action and an invitation, I would say, for folks to be able to expand, and to expand into the possibility of what could be. And I get this question a lot from folks, it's like, well, yeah, these things are hard. It's hard to be compassionate in the workplace. It's hard to do this work, just inner work, to cultivate compassion. And maybe some folks might have this feeling where it's like, that's just too far. It's too much to do. Like, I'm too busy. I don't want to lose my job. So being compassionate to other people might impact me in these ways. And we have to make these decisions and these choices that are very high risk, in some cases. Do you have any advice? Do you have any recommendations for people that might be struggling with that?
Couple things. I can't think of a single company or industry or job, well, maybe a single one, where it's advantageous for you to be a jerk versus treat people well. And so I don't think, so what you're saying, is it hard? Yes, I agree with that. Especially when it comes with the real hard brass tacks of like managing shareholders and driving accountability. Yes, of course it is harder to be a manager who drives accountability in a compassionate way than a manager who just operates in command and control. Yes, it's harder. But I go back to when this is all over, what do you want to be remembered for? There's lots of things that are hard in life. It is a lot, everything. everything is hard. Like sticking to a diet. It is way easier for me to go eat Doritos and something sweet than it is for me to eat healthy. Of course, it's harder to eat healthy. It's harder to go exercise than it is to just sit on the couch and watch TV. It's harder to show gratitude to my partner than it is to just do whatever I want. Are all of those things worth it that are harder? To me, yes. Each one of us has to be the judge of what kind of person do you want to be? What do you want your final bio to say?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna start calling it that. Yeah, and I think there's something that goes along with this too, is like, and I've spoken to a lot of leaders that they want to be compassionate. They practice compassion themselves, and
Hmm.
yet maybe the people they report to do not. And it creates this tension where
Yeah,
maybe they're trying to protect their team, they're trying to cultivate a compassionate and caring environment for people to thrive in, and there's these pressures that are coming from
yeah,
above them or from
yeah,
just maybe even the economy and the ecosystem that that
yeah,
particular company is in.
yeah.
What do we say to those folks, and how do we help them along the way?
Shine your light. Shine your light. Will you change the entire world? Probably not. Let's be real. Like our organization, Changing Work, we're trying to change work for the workforce of 3.5 billion people in the world. Will we change work for all 3.5 billion? Probably not. Will we make a difference to anybody who interacts with us? Man, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this time, when it seems like the wave of negativity, when it seems like the wave is against us, we could roll up, we could give up, we could just go, fine, I guess this is how it's happening. Or we could say, look, no, 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 no. For me, for my team, or just for me, if I'm an individual contributor, I don't have to play that game. I can still show up with joy. I can still treat my colleagues compassionately. I can still treat my customers compassionately. I can still treat somebody up in the food chain who I have no respect for. I can still treat them with compassion because I know what my final bio wants to say.
Mm-hmm.
I know what my values are, and I'm going to shine my light. And if I shine it bright enough, other people will find me. Other people will shine their lights too. And maybe then the pendulum will shift the other way.
Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to is a really beautiful sentiment, and a lot of people I think get overwhelmed because they try to boil the ocean. They try to change the whole world. Maybe I'll hearken a bit of a Rumi quote here from you that might speak to this. But to me, it's like every little bit matters. Every little choice point, every moment to offer compassion, particularly when it's the most difficult. And there's always people in our lives where we struggle to offer compassion. And maybe it's a toxic boss, or maybe it's, the government, or, whatever it might be. It might be hard for us to reach for that.
Yeah,
But just the even desire to reach for that and the attempt to reach
that's
for
right.
that, to me, is a vote towards a more compassionate world.
That's right.
I'm wondering if you have
Nick,
any thoughts on
you've
that.
been sharing the story from Thich Nhat Hanh. I'd like you to share it now about the boat.
Yeah. Oh man, I wish I had it like more readily accessible. But yeah, it's essentially like Thich Nhat Hanh was a refugee. He's leaving Vietnam like during the beginning of the war, the end of the war, and he's in these refugee boats. They're called the boat people. They're essentially these folks that just have no place. And they're seeking refuge someplace. And I'm paraphrasing, but he says something along the lines of, even amidst the pirates in the rocking ocean, if all of if even just one person were to stay calm amidst the despair and fear, then perhaps we might all survive. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but I think the invitation here is to be aware of the tumult and of the uncertainty of our world these days, and to show up with a state of compassion and calm, not just for us, but to invite others in, as you say, shine the light so that other people can see the way and maybe have a little hope.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the call to action for every single one of us. We don't have to save the world. The world doesn't even need saving,
Mhm.
you could argue. But for ourselves, we can save ourselves.
Yeah.
And we don't even need saving. It's just a choice to say, who do we want to be? What values do we want to show up as? One by one. Light your light. Good stuff will happen.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's a beautifully hopeful message. It's a message that I feel like is an invitation to others, particularly leaders in the future and now. To me, compassion, our prior book, Leading with Self Awareness, these core skills of compassion, self awareness, and care, I believe, are what's going to move us forward collectively so that we can all thrive. And if even just one of us can kind of embody these principles, then perhaps we can bring a lot of other people along with us in the boat as well.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Well, Scott, we only have a couple minutes left. Any other last thoughts, any last quotes you'd like to offer, words of wisdom?
Hmm. I've been thinking a lot about my own development during this time of whatever it is, change, chaos, beauty, however you want to perceive it. Uh, and I'll lean on Rumi again. So in my spiritual path, we sometimes talk about being a clear vehicle for something bigger, the divine, whatever words you want to put on it. And Rumi talks about, I'll paraphrase his quote. He says, if you don't like the rub, how will you ever become polished? And I think about that. Like, if I'm trying to be this clear vehicle, then I sign up for the polishing. And there's a lot of polishing to do right now, collectively and individually. And so part of the part of what I'm getting at for me, and I think it's the lesson for all of us, is around self-responsibility. There's a lot of stuff, most stuff, honestly, in the world that we don't control. But what we do control is how we respond to life, how we show up every day. So, to those leaders who say, oh, well, above me, they're not compassionate. Fine. How are you?
Mhm.
How are you? How am I? How are me and you and me, how are we going to show up today? I'm responsible for that. You're responsible for that. Let's start there.
Mm. Well, it's a beautiful call to action. And I think for me, at least, it's just been a beautiful journey exploring these themes and exploring them with a collection of other leaders who are also interested in compassion and interested in making the world of work a more compassionate place to be. For folks that haven't had a chance to check out the book, if you're interested, you can check us out at changingwork.org. Up in the menu bar there's a whole section for media and books. It's Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. It's launching auspiciously on Valentine's Day of 2025. And it's one of a series of books that we're writing. As I mentioned before, we have another Amazon bestseller that we published several months ago, Leading with Self-Awareness, starting from the inside out. We'll have a few more books coming down the road as well. Scott, other than changingwork.org and the book, where else can people find you?
You can come find us at changingwork.org or on LinkedIn. That's the best place. Um, Come write a book with us.
Yeah.
Come write a book with us. And if you don't want to write a book with us, come join our community. It's a special place. There's a lot of love in the room. The world needs more community right now. A lot of communities are getting a bit torn apart. We're trying to create something that works. And we don't have all the answers. So come write a book with us and help us share that wisdom to the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott, for the work that you're doing in the world. Thank you for shining your light. And if folks are interested, please check out our other recordings with our other authors. We have 24 other authors that have been a part of this compilation. And obviously, we have a lot more to say on the topic. So join us, and we hope to see you in the community soon. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.